Hi everyone, today we're here with Nicola Verlato, who's one of the main artists in the Italian and also international figurative landscape at the moment. And he's been very kind to dedicate me time this afternoon. So thank you, Nicola. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm here with Nicola to ask him a little bit about his artistic journey, about his works, about his artistic visions. So I think we can start with that. So Nicola, I would say, if you want, you can start telling me a little bit about your artistic journey, because I know that you started very early when you were very young. So I would be really curious to know a little bit more about that.
Yes, I started when I was I don't even know when I really started, because I was sure I would have been a painter since I was like 5 or 6 years old, a painter or a sculptor.
Yeah, because you told me you wanted to be a sculptor at first.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to be a sculptor. I don't know why. But then, I was like extremely obsessive since I was very little. I was trying to convince my parents to bring me to a place because in the countryside where I grew up, in the courtyard of our building, there were several sculptures made in this kind of soft stone that is used to make like decorative sculptures for gardens. In that area in nearby Vicenza, there were several laboratories to do these things. And so I was trying I really wanted to become a sculptor and going there to learn. So I was constantly obsessing my father and my mother. So finally, one day, my father brought me there. I think he was really totally exhausted by me, constantly asking for this thing. And then, of course, the people in the laboratory, they say, no, absolutely, we don't want to have a little 5-year-old kid around, while we are moving this huge block of stones or things like this. And then I have to resolve to do drawings, and so I diverged to painting instead of sculpture. So, but it was totally.
So it was your plan B.
Yeah, it was my plan B. So all my life is a plan B compared with sculpture. But sometimes I do sculptures too, because I love sculpture. And also, I think my kind of work is very much related to this. An idea of a three-dimensionality in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So your parents, they took you to the sculpture studio. They told you, no, you're not allowed to be there. So how did you start?
And then, I started to think just about drawing and painting. And then we had a lot of art books at home. There was a kind of a general interest for all my family. Even my grandfather, I remember, had several art books at home, his home, and also there was an interest for art in the family.
But they're artists?
No, absolutely. So they were my father painted a little bit when he was young. Also, one of my uncles, and also I think somebody before. For example, I had a little the Tractatus on painterly techniques by De Chirico.
Mm-hmm.
I had the original edition at home, which was printed in 1928. So somebody bought it long time before my birth, and so we had that Tractatus at home. So I don't know why, there was always an interest. And so we had all these art books, so I was always looking at these paintings into these books, and I was, and it was interesting, because they were it was all about the old art history, but I was attracted just by ancient Roman and Greek art and Renaissance, also Gothic art. I liked Gothic art when I was a little kid, Gothic churches particularly. But then what struck me completely was the vision of Caravaggio. The first painter I was completely struck by was Caravaggio. And but not only Caravaggio, then I start to like a lot Michelangelo, Correggio, all the Botticelli, all the Italians. I was constantly copying from these painters, and also was trying to do my own version of that kind of style. But I was completely aware that I didn't have a preparation. I was, my problem was to see how beautiful were those paintings, how much I wasn't able to get even close, to that kind of technique. So I started to assess my parents again. We have to find a painter, somebody want to teach me, somebody has to teach me. I want to go to an art school, etc., etc. At that point, I was 7 years old, something like this. And then, by chance, my parents discovered that there was a monk in a monastery not far from where I grew up, which was teaching to whoever was going there, was an extremely generous person. And so I remember it made me laugh when I think about that, because my mother and my father must have called the monastery, something like this. So they fixed an appointment, but they put me when I was like 7 years old on a bus, to go to the place
On your own.
on my own. I brought a folder of drawings with me. And I remember the scene, that I buzzed the buzzer of the area of the monastery where the monk has his own studio. And there were like some little, maybe 4 or 5 steps, between me and the door. And so there was this monk, who was kind of a fat guy, so it was from Rome also, which opened the door. And was started to look around, but he didn't see me, because I was very little under the...
Like in movies.
Yeah, like in movies. He said, buongiorno. Oh, okay. Ok, che vuoi? So, what do you want? So, sono Nicola Verlato, voglio diventare un pittore. That was I'm Nicola Verlato, I want to be a painter. So the monk started to laugh, come in. And so we started in the way, so I started to go every summer, every day, the whole day, every day. There and learning how to draw, how to paint. It was mostly about drawing, and also I was helping, restoring. But there were also many other people coming, and it was great, because I was the youngest of all, But they was treating me like I was like 20 years old, like the others, It was like I was extremely ambitious when I was a little kid. I was still very ambitious, but when I was a little kid, I think I was like completely crazy. And to me, I really wanted to do things, to make things as the best as possible. And he was constantly telling me, Nicola, you have to think, if Raphael was able to do the things he did at your age, you have to be able to do too. I was thinking, I'm trying, I would like to, but I was like 7, 8, 9 years old,
But it was a good combination of your ambition and him being so...
Yeah, it was
so
extremely serious. It was a very, he was giving me a lot of trust, but he pretended a lot, so I have really to learn. I remember the first months, I was just making straight lines only.
Wow.
It was so tedious. Straight lines only. Then I started to do like the cross etching, to do like the different degrees of chiaroscuro, light and shadows, and then he asked me immediately to do sketches, very quick sketches from people. When I was coming back home, he told me, make sketches of your mother at the desk, your father, your brothers, do like a very quick sketches, like the famous 3-minute sketches, 30-second sketches. So it was the first. It was, the thing that was good. It was like he was taking me very seriously. He didn't think, oh, he's just a little kid, whatever. No, he was taking me like almost an adult person practically. So to me it was amazing because I don't know, I always have a great memories about this person, Fra Terenzio, that was his name. And
until how old you were?
Until 14 years old.
Until 14 years old. And how did your journey evolve after that?
After that, I went to the Liceo Artistico in Verona, the art school, and but I didn't like it. At the same time, I started also to go to the conservatory. I was studying classic music. I was studying the lute, because I loved everything that was about the Renaissance. And I was so lucky that in Verona there was the only class in lute at that time. I'm talking about 1979, something like this. So I was studying the lute. I left the school. I left, Liceo Artistico because I didn't like the professors. Mm-hmm. I thought they weren't able to teach me anything. And so for 3 years, I was just stay home drawing only and playing the lute. I was also studying composition and piano. But then, for some reason, as usually has happened to me all the time. I changed my mind all of a sudden. So I went back to the Liceo Artistico, and I did the 3 years in one. I did the
Get the diploma.
to get the diploma, and I left the conservatory. But I was always painting, meanwhile. I was doing the first commissions. No, because I started to sell my paintings when I was 9 years old.
You told me that. Can you tell me the story about that?
No, it was like my family had a winery, we were producing wine. And so there were like several clients coming to buy the wine, or to buy bottles, to buy, barrels of wine, etc., etc. And they were seeing also this little kid making his paintings. And so they were asking, oh my gosh, but can we buy one? And so, of course, I wasn't asking much money. I was asking 10.000 lire, 10,000 lires, which is meaning, I don't know, 20 euros today, something like this. And I was painting mostly religious themes. I don't know why. It's weird, because I grew up in a very secular family, but I was so impressed by these old masters' paintings, which were most of the time religious, and I was very impressed by this dramatic tone of these narrations. So I made a lot of crucifixions, resurrections, and annunciations, all these kind of things, And one of my favorite painters, for example, now it comes to my mind, was like not just the Italians, also Grunewald was one of my favorite painters, and Dürer, the Germans also. I like them a lot. And so I started to sell these paintings so early, and it was funny because I was selling the paintings, I was buying art books or comic books, and the materials, colors, the easel, all these kind of things. And so to me, it was always inconceivable that a painting a painting has to be sold. For me, it was absolutely the regular thing,
What fascinated you so much about Renaissance painter, or these ancient painters that were probably far from what the contemporary times were pointing at, I guess, right?
Yeah, but I think because I was always thinking about this thing. I don't understand why, because I was barely able to read, when I was seeing these paintings. So I wasn't even able to read, because I started to watch these books when I was like 3-4 years old. I don't know. To me, I think the explanation is like in that moment, they were like really investing so much. To say, they really wanted to do something. It was able to go beyond time, So something that was able not to talk just with with their own time, but they wanted to do something that was able to stay and being able to remain in time. And because this is not, it doesn't have to be taken for granted, because, for example, I was just literally this morning, I was checking one old book, 20 years old book about contemporary art. It was called Art Now, I think, or something like this. And everything is published there was about artists of the end of the 90s, early of the 2000s, and everything looks old already. It looks like something that is just the document of a certain specific moment. Instead, great art, in my opinion, or at least the art I'm interested about, is the one that is really able to
survive time.
To survive times, but to show you the time doesn't exist in some way, that is able to show you that the painter who made those paintings, or the sculptor who made those sculptures, are exactly as us today, So when you see a sculpture made by Fidia in the 500 before the Common Era, 2,500 years ago, you don't see any difference. You see that that person is exactly like us. Instead, when you see somebody who made certain kind of works, like a video art of the late 90s, you see that he is already dead, is part of the past. While, classic art, Renaissance art, is really, they show you that there's no past or future or present. It's just the essence of humanity. So I think in that moment, in those two moments and other moments probably, humanity, those people wanted really to show the essence of humanity. They've been able to do it, and I think it's totally possible to do it even now if you want, It's something absolutely doable.
And that leads me to a question that I have, because I've been thinking about your roots, your foundation, your inspiration, which is mostly Renaissance, as you said. And it was that period where Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raffaello, and other great ones were contemporaries.
Yeah.
And maybe we never had another time like that where such a great talents all lived together. And probably that was brought by historical conditions, by the time and so on. But do you think it's possible to restore conditions like that? And what do you think we need today to make sure that we'll still be able to experience something like this in the future?
I think it's totally possible. The only thing, is all about how society, because it's not about, the individuals only. Of course, as you said, there were like three guys like that, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael, all in the same moment, in the same place, And then they were there in Florence, in Venice. There was Giovanni Bellini, Titian, Giorgione, and Lotto, Veronese, Tintoretto, all these kind of. Botticelli was in Florence just before the three big guys, So all of that happened because there was a certain attitude toward art, toward what is humanity in some way, So they were investing and focusing so much on the production of images, So, for example, even today there is a lot of artists around the world, and maybe we can say that Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst are the Leonardo or Michelangelo today. I don't think so. I don't think they are not at all. Not even comparable. They look like more like entrepreneurs rather than artists. The difference is like that. People like Michelangelo, somebody who was controlling the whole creative process. Even if Raphael had a lot of assistance, but he was the one who was taking a piece of paper and was starting to make the sketch, and out of that the whole process was. So it's like somebody who was like he had the total control on the creative process, which is not like just a technical thing. It's like a methodology of investigation to go to find something, to find the form, and also on the other side, there was like all these commissioners, the church, the aristocratic people, the rich bourgeois, the rich bourgeoisie, which were like investing a lot of money, because they understood that there was like this very profound kind of communication that was made through art. And today, for several reasons, we are not in that situation. Maybe something is coming back right now, but for sure we just came out of a very long period of time in which there was a total dismissal of art. It was even if we had like a huge names like Picasso or Duchamp or this and that, all of that was part of what became to be called the art world.
Yeah.
The art world is meaning something specialized, something that is immediately marginalized, is not at the center, is something on itself, and something for specialists. Why, in the times of those people, there was no art world, there was the world into which art has to get, into form the world. It was a completely different kind of conception. I really hope we're going to get out of this recent point of view in which we've been involved for almost 200 years, let's say from the start of modernity in art, from Impressionism on, we've been into this logic for which, there is the art world that is a specialized place and doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the world.
Yeah, because we shifted from having a high consideration of artists to today's world where artists are considered are basically on the margin of society almost, right? And why do you think that happened? How?
It happened for many different reasons. We have to think, that the Western world is being always is a place of conflicts of different cultures. This is my view on what is the Western world. And there is one component of our culture that is the monotheistic religious component, which has as its roots the the forbidden of images. The fact that the images they can always become idols. So there is a lot of suspicion about the power of images. Starting from the Bible, the second commandment there is a prohibition of making of images. And of course, the second commandment in the Bible is also in Christianity. At the beginning, Christianity, when it became like the main religion in Rome, was completely aniconic. There were no images. And then slowly images came back. Because of course the polytheistic world was so important, so big, there was not possible to get rid of it so easily. So images came back again, but they were like less. They were different than the ones of the classicism, and of course they were like the Byzantine iconoclastic wars in I think 300 or 400 after Christ. So there were actual wars, people killing each other because of the images or because of the rule of images into the society, into religion. And then, the being, after the Renaissance, which was like the coming back of images, because the Renaissance is the Renaissance of death in particular, the Renaissance of images, of this thing that has been excluded for so many centuries. And so starting from Giotto, let's say, it was coming back particularly in Italy, but not only in Italy, because also in Germany, in Holland, in Belgium, etc., etc. But then, of course, there was another reaction against it, which was like Protestantism, which another time destroyed all the images into the churches. They created again this censorship about painted images, and then Enlightenment is seen by somebody almost as a prosecution of of Calvinism and the prohibition of images. And then modernity, of course, is again is in a way to eliminate images, painted and sculpted images, and to substitute them with abstract images, conceptual art, which is meaning words, written words, which is exactly the real goal of all these things, is to substitute the images with the written word. That's the real goal of modernity in some way. But we are getting out of that, because today there's so many painters, so many figurative painters, and very good ones also. Of course, it's always it's always tricky, because it's not so easy to understand. At least I have my own point of view about this, which is also a little bit is a little bit strict, about the idea of what kind of image we are supposed to paint today in order to make something relevant.
But tell me, what do you think these are?
No, because it's always complicated. For example, there is a lot of new academic painters coming out right now. But unfortunately, in my opinion, most of the times they are too much attached to a certain kind of painting that is the one of the late 19th century. Great painters like Sargent, Bouguereau, all these great painters were very good painters, but in my opinion, those are the painters out of which the crisis of painting started. I see in Sargent already the problems of what modernity will become, with the disintegration of the form, the gesture that is becoming more important than the image. Or in Bouguereau, there's a lot of problems of light and shadows and space, these kind of things. So I think today we have to avoid, to consider that there are, I don't see history as a linear evolution. To me, there are moments, the Renaissance is kind of a sparkle or light, the ancient Greece is the same, there are some, and then, there are single figures that during history we were able to revitalize the certain aspects of painting or art in general that they can be very useful still now. For example, Jacques-Louis David, to me, was like one of the greatest artists of Western world, because he was able to make like some extremely relevant images. Of course, he was somebody very smart to be able to work in the right moment. And he was very careful about power, all these kind of things. But that's also part of a kind of job that we have to do, So, of course, and
tell me. And you mentioned already some elements, but I want to link this topic to, so like, what do you think makes great art?
It's a super huge question. This one, of course, is not so easy to say that. To me, great art is made by a balance of different elements working in a dialectical way between each other. So to me, great art is based on conflict. There is a conflict every time that we have to. There is a conflict and a transformation practically into a great painting. So there is, and usually there is a narration. For sure, there is a narration. I don't know if it's at the beginning or after, but for sure there is a narration. Then there is a form. Form wants to appear, to want to order, wants to transform time into space, for example. So if I don't see this conflict between these elements, I'm not interested, If I see, for example, a painting that is like, I don't know, an astral painting, I don't care, because it's just one of the elements of what is needed to be included into a painting to make it a painting in some way. So to me, a great art is a very complex entity made by many different elements in a dialectic relationship between each other, and basically is a sort of transformation based on a conflict. And there are many different components acting together to create this painting. But then the beauty of a painting is when all these elements are coming naturally out, from the gesture of the painter, but he needs all these things together, because art in general is not just painting or sculpture, or to me also music is the same thing. It's like this struggle of eternal, of a spirit to appear in the world. He wants, in sort of way, the spirit wants to tell you, I'm inhabiting this world, So it's never just the thing in itself. When I'm painting a pier, the pier, I don't care about it, if there isn't, but you can make an amazing painting just with the pier, For example, there is the famous Ficella by Caravaggio, For some reason, that's a masterpiece. And then there are many still lifes that they don't tell me anything, but that one has something amazing. And it's also made by little details. For example, one of the main beautiful details of the painting is the fact that the basket is coming slightly toward the viewer, a projected shadow. So immediately it's telling you that form was to come in your world. There is immediately this mutual relationship between the observer and the object. There is a transition between these two different worlds, for example. So but Caravaggio was able to do these kind of things. That's great art, of course. But of course it can be made with the little basket of fruit, but can be like the Transfiguration by Raphael, which is an extremely complex painting in which you see all the elements of painting showed at the best or the highest level, for example. But anyway, it's something complicated, it's something complex into which there is a transformation. So it's never just this plus this. It's like this plus this this against this, they are creating something that this plus this, instead of being 1 plus 1 is becoming is 1 plus 1 you equal 2, is 1 plus 1 equal 200. That's what's happening into a painting, into a real work of art, you know.
That's beautiful what you're saying. You said something that that fascinates me, because you said that it's like a bit of spiritual thing that goes into the painting, and I was actually gonna ask you, do you believe in God or in any sort of spirituality?
But you know, I think I don't know. I never really consider much. I never believed in any god, you know. Let's say the only I believe in the power of images. You know, I really think that painting and sculpture and music and art in general is the place where all religions are originated. You know, so sort of way through these tools. We are exploring the relationship between us and the cosmos, not just us and the world. Us and our relationship with the cosmos. I think that the truth is really there, practically.
Yeah.
And the key to understand spirituality is the work of art. In fact, you know, I think, you know, we understand that you know, people 40,000 years ago, they had for sure rituals and religious ideas based on the paintings that they left into the caves, or the little sculptures, or the little musical instruments, which are all related to the idea that there were rituals and things like this, you know. So religion, I think, is coming out from this the fact that you do something and all of a sudden that thing is magic, you know. You make an image on a wall, it's like you are transfixed by this image, you know. So I think a religion comes out from there. It's not the other way around. It's not the first there is a religion which then needs images. It's from the images that the sense of spirituality is coming from, in my opinion.
I like this idea because it's sort of similar to what I think too, actually. Yeah. So it's interesting. And what about your inspiration? Because to me, inspiration is a sort of spiritual thing, a sort of magical thing as well that happens, no, when it comes to us. But where do you draw your inspiration from? Does it just come out on a random moment, or you have some art that you like watching or listening to, or some rituals that you...
I think, you know, it's like there are at least couple of different ways through which I'm starting my own works, you know. So one can be, you know, even reading the news or listening to the radio or to the internet, you know, watching news on television. And so I think I just want to make an image out of that, you know, but not the specific thing. I want to give an answer. I need to make order in things I considering about what's happening around ourselves in this moment. I just want to make an image that is able to synthesize something. Usually it's like that, you know, or otherwise I'm starting to make drawings and then the inspiration comes from the making of the things, you know. So many times for me is exactly giving an answer to something that they start to obsess me, but usually are things about our daily life and the news and what's going on around the world in some way.
And connecting to this, do you, like, for you, is art mostly self-expression, so expressing your own point of view, or does it have anything to do with political point of view as well, or responsibility, or like, can art be more than self-expression?
You know, it's like I think it unavoidably is self-expression, of course, but on the other side, you know, that's the default point, you know. You start from yourself, but through the kind of investigation that you do while you are drawing, and you are starting to get in a different level. That is something, in my opinion, is more universal. You start from yourself because, you know, many times I was like surprised to hear people even teachers, say I'm encouraging the student to be more personal. But to me, it's unavoidable to be personal. That's our problem, to be too individual, too personal. The point is like that from art gives you this opportunity to start from something that is very personal and to start to find out something more universal, something in which your own personality is finally you're getting rid of your personality, you're getting to something that is more the essence of humanity. Because I always thinking that our individuality is sort of a wound in some way, something that makes us limited. And through art, we are getting to something that is much more beyond ourselves, So the political thing to me is extremely important, because I think that the artist is able to do something that is useful for the others, something that is sort of the painter, the sculptor, or the artist in general is somebody that is able to do this, to excavate into itself or self, to find something that is common to everybody and to pick it up and bring it outside and to show that, and it's very political in my opinion, that there is something that is common for everybody. So that's why sometimes when you see that there are people, many people can be very, I don't know, struck by what you did. For example, I made a big mural not from here, and I remember I was surprised to see people crying in front of it. So I saw such an emotional response, but because I think this is coming because you are not trying to express yourself. You are trying to express something that goes beyond yourself, and by doing that, you can possibly reach something that is common to everybody and is going beyond time. Real art is that thing, So I don't know if I'm able to do it, but for sure the paintings that I love, like Michelangelo, Caravaggio, Raphael, Dürer, whatever, they're being able to do that, because there was the whole society working with them and were putting them in charge to do that. Go there, we are not able to do it, you have to be like a speleologist, Go into the cave and go down and find what is common to everybody, but we are not able to pick it up, and you can, because artists has this technique, they can excavate and find in deep down what is common to everybody.
I like this. I really like it. Thank you. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about your work, because you were showing me what you're working on right now. I mean, you work on so many projects all the time. I also visited your studio in May, and you were working on completely other things. But I also wonder, like, why did you decide also to teach? Is there a reason for that? Do you want to make an impact in some way, or is there any other reason? Because I'm so surprised that you take this commitment as well with so many things.
Exactly, because when I was in New York, when I was living in New York, I was teaching there, and I visited New York Academy of Art, which is a very good school, and they took a little bit of time to convince me to teach. I didn't care at the beginning, but then after 3-4 times I tried, and it was very nice, it was very interesting to transmit my ideas, to see how the students were reacting to it. It's always, you are teaching, but it's also a dialogue, so it's very interesting. But one thing that I saw as an Italian, I think we have a certain point of view about things that are not so common around the world. Just because, we grew up among these amazing things. We are surrounded by works of art, paintings, sculptures everywhere. We don't even have to go to museums to see them. They're everywhere, in churches, but also on the facade of buildings. You see amazing things everywhere, particularly in a city like Rome or Florence or Venice. You are surrounded by beauty, practically, by art, let's say. And so I was always surprised to see the take that Americans have on the idea of classic art. That to me is completely wrong. Is absolutely something that goes completely against the possibility to make great art.
On what
For
point?
example, there is this method of drawing that is called the Barg method, that is a disaster in my opinion, because it makes people not being able to draw practically. They can draw just from life. It's just they have to turn off their brain and start to trace lines that then magically they're going to become a figure. But that's not the way to draw, because then you're going to get stuck just on that thing, on drawing some plaster cast or, I don't know, somebody naked on a couch or things like this, So real art is not that one, You have to be able to explore through drawing all the possibilities of your imagination practically, So art is about imagination. It's about what we were talking about before. In that way, you're getting stuck, and you just get stuck on the beginning of the end of figurative art, let's say. You are just at the beginning of modernity, because if you take the Barg method and you don't finish your drawing, you are having a cubist drawing by Picasso. Picasso was studying with the Barg method. Everybody at that time, and avant-gardes were coming out from academic art. That's the paradox. The most academic methodology destroyed completely the objective of all that methodology, which was like about making these amazing drawings, etc., etc., etc. But then we created the opposite of it, which was like the destruction of that form, because that was the completely messed up way to approach drawing. Drawing is about, and so by seeing this, I was thinking it would be so great to have a school in Italy where you teach things in the Italian way, So the Italian way is about, form, being able to understand form in the three-dimensional way. Like, you can see that in the sketches by Raphael, by Leonardo, etc., which is absolutely the opposite of the Barg method,
Yeah.
So I was always thinking that there was something very peculiar, very specific about the Italian mentality that is not possible to find in any other part of the world. I know that it's not so fashionable to talk about identity, etc., but we have, despite ourselves, a very strong identity, and so that's why I like to teach, to try to see if it's possible to show another way to make images, because of course, in Italy there's a lot of these American schools being opened in particularly in Florence, which is kind of ridiculous, because then these people, they paint in a way that doesn't have nothing to do with with the tradition of Florence. There's no, to me, it's completely, I don't understand why they have to teach that. They can teach, in any other part of the world. Doesn't make any sense that they choose Italy and Florence to teach in that way, because that's the negation of everything that the Renaissance was. But these people have an idea that, for them, Bouguereau is better than Michelangelo. I'm pretty sure they think like that. They think Michelangelo was just the beginning, and now finally, in the end of the 19th century, we had Bouguereau. It's a disaster. They think in that way, because they think in that way because they are coming from a culture into which art is marginalized, and they immediately self-marginalize themselves immediately. They put themselves at the margins of what can be done. In fact, what they do still lifes, portraits. Nobody is trying to do something more than that, something that painting can be engaged to do something more relevant. There's no social or political things, never in those paintings, sometimes something religious, but in sort of way, it's like people who decided to live at the margins of our world. Instead, for me, art is the center. And a world without art is a world without center, practically, which is the one in which we are living.
I wonder if that's also because in 1800, the French atelier was born and so on. And at the same time, we started forgetting a little bit about our Italian tradition, the way we used to make art and so on. So I guess that right now there's not even that many people who remember that tradition, right? I think you have studied a lot, you have digged a lot into that, and you're one of the few who can do it, and it's not as popular at the moment.
The reason why I think in this way is because to me it was always striking to see how beautiful were the paintings of the Renaissance, and how the paintings of the 19th century, the academic paintings, were so well done, but they weren't beautiful. They had something dead in it. I was always thinking, what is missed there? What is the problem there? So all my life was like trying to avoid that. This because of course I like academic painting of the 19th century, but there is incommensurably less than the Renaissance ones or the classic Greek Roman ones. And so I think, because Italy, after the reunification of Italy, Italy wasn't Italy anymore. Italy practically became like just a weak state in Europe. The center of the arts was Paris at that time, of course, and all the Italians were trying to paint like the French painters, of course. There was a kind of rebirth when Rome became the capital of Italy again, in 1870s, when painters like Sartorio started to become very prominent, maybe even Maccari. But anyway, it was like a very nice moment between the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, I think. At least I like Sartorio a lot, for example. But also there was De Caroli, Scambellotti, many other very good artists in that moment. And then, of course, there was like all the history of Italy, which was very complicated during the 20th century. But honestly, during the 20s and 30s, there were like some amazing painters, like Sironi, Casorati, they made some fantastic things. But of course, Italy was always like that was like a kind of interesting, because in that moment, all around the world there was an interest for Italy, because the Mexican painters like Diego Rivera was coming here in Italy to study Giotto in the Cappella di Scrovegni in Padua. Or otherwise, I don't know, painters like Thomas Arbento was studying Tintoretto to make 3D models out of which. So in sort of way, in that moment, the Italian point of view became relevant again, because it was a way to get out of academicism and also out of a distraction created by the avant-garde. There was like a sort of way, the third way, there was always there, just waiting to be rediscovered. And that's what's happened during the 20s and 30s, but not just in Italy, all around the world. Also, the new objectivity, in Germany, like people like Otto Dix or Christian Schad, these painters were all inspired by the Italians, by, for example, Ubaldo Oppi, which was like a very good painter, in my opinion, of the 20s and 30s in Italy. So Italy is always there in sort of way. We created such our ancestors, in this territory for almost 3,000 years. They created such a tradition of figurative art that is difficult to take away, So of course, during the 19th century, it was always sad to me to see the painters of the Risorgimento, for example, people like Induno or they're like, I don't know, they don't even seem to be Italians, most painters, But in fact, then, if you study history, you understand the Risorgimento was financed with a lot of money coming from the banks of England and this and that. So you see that it was like, Italy being reunified, but probably there was a lot of interest from other places to make Italy not being Italy anymore, practically. So at least that's what I think, and it's kind of similar to what's happening right now. That's why, it would be so interesting to start again from art, because I think it is like the most important thing we have. In fact, the one thing that makes me annoyed all the time is to hear, tourists, like particularly the Americans, that were coming here and they say, "Oh, Italy, amazing. I ate so much pasta and pizza." Fuck you, come on. So you didn't go to see a fountain in Piazza Navona? Didn't you go to see a museum? There is just pasta and pizza here. It almost looks like that they want to reduce Italy just to that, It's so disgusting, this thing. So anyway, for me, teaching is like trying to be at the service of this idea, try to see that if there is a possibility to teach figurative art in a different way, because I'm very worried. Because many Italians are starting to go to study in these American schools. They are there, they're going there, and they are unlearning their own identity in some way.
Yeah, I can see that you take this as a mission.
In some way, yes. Yeah.
That's very nice. Well, okay, thank you for this. And just to close this topic, going to your career instead, you produced a lot of paintings. You produce all the time a lot of paintings, but is there one particular achievement that you're really proud of or you really care about in your past career?
But I didn't even produce too many paintings, unfortunately. So
maybe compared to others, because it's so relative.
I'm so slow, unfortunately. But on the other side, I think one of the things I liked the most to do was this big project on Pasolini that I made, in which I was able to put together painting, sculpture, architecture, and music, all the things I studied. I was able to put all of them together around one singular theme. Which is, the idea to make a monument to Pasolini in the place where he got killed, that is nearby here in Rome, in Ostia. And the thing that is so weird that I just received, somebody sent me a post that there's this online magazine that is called Eflux, that they started a competition for a monument to Pasolini.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if they saw me doing it or they spontaneously imagined that, of course, they're going to participate, I'm going to send the thing. But it is interesting to me to see that, because I started to work on this project 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's been something that I was working for more than 10 years. Creating paintings, sculptures, architecture, all these kind of things. So for me, that's kind of my Gesamtkunstwerk, let's say the total work of art, Mm-hmm. And I hope I'm going to be able to do more of these things. Probably that's what I like to do the most,
Yeah.
Because in that case, I was making the hypothesis of the idea that art doesn't have to be necessarily, painting doesn't have to be necessarily related to the market. Can be something that is related to the territory, that is giving voice, more than giving voice, is giving form to a narrative that is embedded into the territory. Mm-hmm. So it's just, materializing this narrative and transform it into space, in the space where the thing happened. So that's probably my best achievement until now.
That's amazing, and I wish you'll be able to do it.
I really hope so. It's not so easy. I'm going to try to.
I remember you telling me about this project even other times that we met in the past, and you said you've been working on that for years. I really hope it will come to life, because I know how much you worked on it and how 360 degrees your vision is on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm switching a bit topics, but since we are getting to the end of the interview, I would love to know which advice you have for newly born artists, let's say, who really want to make art their life, their career.
I don't know. It's always complicated to say, because I'm coming from this point to a certain historical moment that is very different than now, Because when I was young, figurative art was seen as something completely dead, completely. And now is the opposite. It became I think it's the most central thing in contemporary art right now, figurative painting. I think it's so strong in this moment. So the only suggestion is I don't know, if I don't know, to believe in what you do, to believe in painting, to believe in the fact that, I can say this, that to think that the painted image is the most important media still now. It will be always the most important media, because all of our ideas, narrations, and everything wants to find a place in the world, in the real world. It wants to become an object in the world. So the best tool to do that is a painting or a sculpture. Don't think that because there is, I don't know, video games or movies or television or this and that, painting gonna die. It will never die. It will die only in the moment when, and maybe they're gonna try to do, somebody is already thinking probably to do that, they're gonna take away a piece of our brain that is a specific piece, that the one that is regulating empathy. And if that gonna happen, painting gonna die. But since our brain is made in this way, painting will never die. It's like is the most important media ever, from the beginning to the end. So never lose trust into painting and sculpture.
Are you hopeful for the future of art?
Yeah, much more now than when I was young. I was kind of desperate when I was younger. Today, I think in contrast, by the effect of the contrast with artificial intelligence or these kind of things, I think painting is getting re-evaluated a lot, because it's a sort of resistance of a human, So we are showing that we are human exactly by tracing lines on a piece of paper, So we see the humanity into there, and we can't lose contact with ourselves. Of course, is again, a conflict, So we have to be. The other suggestion is to be ready to be into a conflict, practically. It's always been that.
It's a fight. Being an artist.
Yeah, I think so. But it's the beauty of fight. At least I always loved it. Maybe now I'm getting older, I'm getting a little bit tired, but the beauty of making art to me is exactly that one. It's like it's kind of you show that there is a certain point of view on things that can't be cancelled.
But I guess that every type of things that we do is a fight, and being artist is true to ourselves, bring our own ideas and fight for them in
exactly.
sense. And I love how we are concluding the interview on this note, because we started and you said that you never thought it was possible to make money with your paintings, to sell these paintings and so on, and now it's your whole life, you're producing so much.
No, I always thought I would have made money. Yeah, because to me it was inconceivable not to sell my paintings.
Right.
Absolutely. No, I always lived in that conviction, that which is completely delusional in sort of way. But to me, if I make a painting, it has to be sold, because I started to sell paintings when I was like 9 years old, as I said before. No, absolutely.
I misunderstood that, but it's great, because it shows that you believe in that, and you.
Yeah. I've always been kind of I always aggressively believed in the idea that everything that I do has to be given away and find a place in the world. That was my idea, So it's almost like you are making a child. This child has to live his own life. He cannot be with you in the studio forever. In fact, I never have anything here, practically.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have 3 huge paintings that I have to sell. Now I'm desperately trying to sell them, also because I need the money.
Send me the pictures, I will publish them in the video. Exactly. Thank you, Nicola.
We try for sale.
Exactly.
Grazie.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.